Today we're focused on the book of Numbers. It's an exciting book in the Bible. I'm sure all of you are just, well, besides Kenneth and John, are read the book of Numbers, right?
Yes.
Kenneth and John, have you read the book of Numbers? Of course you have, and you have. Yeah, so there we go. Just making sure. Do you remember it?
No.
Oh, there we go. Okay, then you fail. John, you remember the book of Numbers, don't you?
Of course.
See, he knows.
I will quiz you after the service.
So, in case you didn't know, the book of Numbers was originally called, in its original version in the Talmud was in the book, the Hebrew Bible was in the wilderness. That's what the original title of the Numbers. What?
I would have guessed that.
Right after I told you would have. It was titled In the Wilderness because that's where they went in their exile from Egypt. That's where the Jews went. Moses' clan went to into the wilderness, and the wilderness, to be clear, is not the promised land. And I printed out a few notes because I don't always remember all of these things. Now, the book of Exodus, interestingly enough, covered a year in time. Leviticus covered 1 month. Because that was just about teaching the priests and the rabbis how to worship, basically, to do no wrong thing at any time during the day, or you will be stoned to death. But, you know, rah, I love my church. But the book of Numbers encompasses more than 38 years, interestingly enough. Now, I read the beginning of Numbers. And what they're doing at the beginning, the Lord, Moses' intuition, said to take a census. So to count the numbers that he had. To count all those numbers. And what he did, when you take a census, what you're doing is you're taking stock of what you have. Hence today's talk, taking stock of what I have and what I haven't. And so Moses was taking stock of what he had to get them to the promised land of New Canaan. How many ministers are making that joke today? It's actually called Canaan. The land of Canaan. And so Moses he was leading them all to get to Canaan. It's a very nice place in Connecticut. And it's and then the third book of the the third book of the Bible, Moses tells us what happened during those 38 years. The wilderness was never meant to be Israel's destination. The intention was to bring them into the promised land of Canaan. The wilderness was intended as a temporary place. And metaphysically, I would say most of us are in the wilderness. You know, we're in that land of, well, we use the word inappropriately, but it's, we say figuring it out. You know, we're here trying to figure it out. And that's why we're stuck in the wilderness. Because we're trying to figure it out. And we're not seeking the highest that already knows. We're not really seeking the highest within us that already knows. We're pretending to. We're pretending to seek what we call God, to know the highest. But really what we're doing, I don't mean to insult anyone here, but I think a lot of you can identify with me when I say this. We're really seeking to tell God what's wrong and how God could make it better with our lives, with other countries, with other churches, with our money and everything. And I've had moments in my life where I have sincerely sought the counsel of the highest mind within me. I've had long stretches, actually, where I have sincerely sought the highest counsel from the highest mind within me, where I actually wanted to know the truth more than I wanted to tell anyone or anything what I was thinking. And in those stretches, my life was magnificent. When truth was more important to me than what I thought. It was wonderful. It was just wonderful. And I've had stretches of those in the past 23 years where I would just sit down and I didn't care what I heard because I knew what I was going to hear would set me free, even if I was wildly uncomfortable. Now, a lot of us here come from 12-step backgrounds, and there's a fourth step, which is taking a moral inventory of your life, your resentments, and what have you. And before that is a third step. Imagine that. Before the fourth is the third, and the third is making a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Operative word being care. So one would have to trust. And it sounds nice, but it's not that easy to do because, again, one would have to sacrifice their opinions. But when it happens, when often we have to really reach rock bottom to get to that point, to turn our will and our life over to the care of an invisible presence. But in that inventory, to look at your resentments, so that you can face them. To look at, oh, I'm mad at this one, mad at this one, mad at this one, mad at this one. And then there's a second column that goes on that paper. It says, because. I'm mad at this one, because, fine. And then that third column, well, what's that about? Oh, what's my part in that? How am I continuing to hurt myself when I'm mad at somebody else? When I'm resentful of this situation? How am I? What's going on with me that I'm holding on to this issue? This person, this behavior, this thought that I'm insisting on holding, and 9 times out of 10 it's your pride that you think you know better. When I did this a second time, this process, and the fifth step is telling it to another person, admitting to God, to ourselves, another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, and that's where the fourth and fifth column, the third and fourth column come in there. And so when the first time I attempted this process, I had 44 typed pages. And when I sat down with a mentor, sponsor, we call them, what we discovered is I'm probably pretty self-centered here. Narcissistic, and I think a lot about me. And that gentleman that they did not want to hear 44 typed pages. But I walked away with a little more insight. A few months later, when I was about 8 months into my healing, my head was going to explode if I didn't really face these thoughts, face these feelings. And so I found somebody else who was talking about it, just having received this process from somebody, and I said, would you take me through it? And he came to my home, and we got down on our knees and prayed together. The third step prayer, which many of you have heard, you can Google this anytime, the third step prayer, which says that, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Now, the only way I could really get on board with that was one I heard a woman sharing one night about her awful life and everything that was horrible in it. And she would end every share with, but I know God's will for me is to be happy, joyous, and free, so I'm going to keep coming back. And I thought, God's will for me is to be happy, joyous, and free. My goodness. Now, if you're taking a census, that's an asset. That's one of your assets, that God's will for you is to be happy, joyous, and free. Not a person's will, but the will of God, G-O-D. And God, how could God's will not be done? And so to look into that, and I thought, okay, now, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, do with me as thou wilt, make me happy, joyous, and free. Relieve me of the bondage of self. And I thought, what is the bondage of self? And the bondage of self for me was my victim. It was my feeling that I was under attack everywhere I went in the world. Somewhere I was under attack by people, by the weather, by money, by my body, by the street, by the sky, everywhere. Somewhere I was attacked, even by people who loved me. There was always a sense of being attacked because I had so little sense of self at that point. And so I was using others to give me an identity. And so, but now, happy, joyous, and free, I no longer was needing other people to give me an identity. I was getting on board, claiming my own self, my own being. I am loved by this principle. And so, bondage of self was me thinking you want to hurt me or I want to hurt somebody else. But it says, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will, that I may better be happy, joyous, and free. And then there was take away my difficulties, which to me meant my rent would be paid. Take away my difficulties. So, please, that was, I didn't want to have to think about how's my rent going to be paid every month for the rest of my life. You know? And so but it just meant it would happen. And so if I turn my will and my life over to the care, it doesn't mean sit in a chair. It means turn my will and my life over to care of God, which means I am divinely guided to my joy, as it were. You know, so take away my difficulties. Why? The victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And that was phenomenal. The victory over them. To those I would help, it meant I was connected. I was connected. It meant I wasn't alone anymore. It also meant that my having a great life is a life of service. That if I wasn't encumbered with thoughts, that I'm bound by problem and issue and everything, that I could be of service, which made me connected, because I was so lonely, because I felt so disconnected. And so, and finally, the victory of them may bear witness to those that would help thy power, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And I thought, may I always be happy, joyous, and free. And when I am releasing myself to the care of divine law, the care of divine principle, I have every opportunity to be happy, joyous, and free, and to see correctly. So in my numbers, in my taking stock of what I have, see, we all have something that God does not have, and that is the ability to forgive. God does not need the ability to forgive because God does not judge. That's the other thing we have in our inventory, the ability to judge correctly or incorrectly. But to begin to look into forgiveness, and I looked up a couple of things there. Because remember, we're talking about getting to the promised land. And the promised land isn't a place of nothing. It is the place of everything and knowing what to do with it. It is the place where I am no longer in bondage to the material. I'm no longer in bondage to my thoughts. I'm no longer in bondage. That's what our promised land is. Jerusalem metaphysically means peace. And we're looking to get that place of peace. It doesn't mean the place of not doing anything, not being anything. And a lot of people think, oh, if I get rid of all my problems, I'll just be dead. Oh, if I stop worrying about everything, I'll just be dead. No, I will be more vitally alive than ever. And life is still going to happen on life's terms because there's flesh going on here, and there's stuff going on with the flesh and all of that. But it's knowing what to do with it. It's knowing what to think about it. And so I looked at a couple of things here. Let me tell you what I looked at. And it comes from the book of Luke. Coincidence, I didn't plan it. Luke is sitting over there. I don't think he wrote this. Okay, so in the book of Luke, in the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament, it says, it's chapter 17, everything you experience through the filter of your mind. You believe in the law of separateness, but the Spirit of God is one. You have given your willingness that you may be healed. Whenever you think you are focused on the world, you are focused on thought. Judgment makes thought seem real and gives meaning to thought. There is no power outside the power of the mind. Now let's talk about forgiveness. Based on the law of separateness, you may forgive other persons for what they have done to offend or hurt you. You may also choose not to forgive them and to hold on to a grievance. In order to do this, you must have made a judgment that separates you from your brother or your sister. So you see, our judgments about each other is what separates us rather than brings us together. Even our judgments of what we like separate us. Based on God's law, the Spirit of God is one. There is no separate one that can offend or hurt you. There is only a collection of thoughts which you hold within your mind. Of themselves, the thoughts have no meaning. But based on past learned through judgment, the thoughts seem to have meaning. And so you feel offended or hurt based on what you think you know. Can you see how your brother or your sister has done nothing? Can you see how all meaning that has seemed to result in hurt has come from the filter of your mind? And can you also see how all meaning that seems to be applied is applied because you believe that the meaning applied is real? Yet this does not mean that the meaning is real or meaningful in any way. It only means that you believe it is. And so you react as if it is. In this way, you continue to learn the meaning that you apply to your thoughts. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is simply an acknowledgement of the truth of how the offense or hurt has come about. It has not come from your brother or your sister. It has come from the meaning you have applied to thoughts within your mind. Without this meaning, you could not be hurt. And then, forgiveness is taking this realization one step further by acknowledging you do not want to be hurt anymore. Take that in, everybody. Breathe. Forgiveness will come about when you acknowledge you do not want to be hurt anymore. And when you decide you do not want to be hurt anymore, you will stop giving meaning, or at least the same meaning, to the world you see. You will stop giving the same meaning to your body. You will stop giving the same meaning to your spouse. You will stop giving the same meaning to money. You will stop giving the same meaning to anything and anyone. It thrilled me to read that today. Forgiveness is taking the realization by one step further by acknowledging you do not want to be hurt anymore. So it's not about getting rid of the person. It's about letting go of the meaning you've given to what you think the person has said or done. You acknowledge that the meaning has hurt you is within the mind. You are the owner or believer in that meaning. And so you are also the one that can let go of any meaning you have applied. And when the meaning is let go, the offense or hurt must disappear also, for there is no longer a power to influence and affect. What was made has been undone, and this is the place of forgiveness. I love that. What was made has been undone. I did that with my mother before she died. Told her she didn't have to apologize. I saw my childhood as one that brought me to here. And here was good, and therefore, now there was a process that went on before that. But would you consider going through that process? It's not about just simply deciding. You know, once you decide I don't want to be hurt anymore, then you have to come to terms with it's your thoughts that are hurting you, not what they did. This is the big stuff. This is why you don't have to just not do anything and come to unity. Yeah, you gotta really look at this and say, holy smokes, what are they asking of me? Well, what I'm asking you is to take inventory of what you have. You have a mind. You have the ability to think. And then you have the ability to rethink. Isn't that fantastic? We all have the ability to think and then to rethink. I love this. And so, you okay?
Sorry.
That's okay. Rethink it. Philippians 4:8. It says, finally. I'll add one word here, brethren and sisterin. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. I'm going to read it again. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, the size of a mustard seed there, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard, do. And the God of peace will be with you. And so, begin to count your blessings. Take stock of what you have. And if there are any blessings missing, look, and I guarantee you will find